Hello, welcome to the France 24 debate. The death of Iran's key figure Ali Larijani raises more questions than answers. First, Israel says they've killed him in an airstrike. Tehran is yet to confirm or deny. While Israel and the United States rejoice and call on Iranian people to rise up and overthrow what's left of their Islamic leadership, the reality on the ground is less certain. The systematic killing of the leaders of Iran since February the 28th has created a vacuum in Tehran. The fear among analysts is that this space could be filled by regime insiders who could be hardened and more radical. Ali Larijani was the lead negotiator at the now aborted talks to find a peaceful way forward on the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was one who was considered to be a possible successor to the supreme leader of Iran. He was very much a voice a key advisor. And Washington saw Larijani at that time as a good fit as successor, a man perhaps they could have done business with. But who comes next? What could this mean for the war? How might it affect the other groups in the region that take their lead from Iran's leadership? The panel to discuss this in studio, I will introduce them to you now. Peyman Azmudeh is Senior Consultant with the Risk and Compliance Group Forward Global, covering the Middle East and Africa. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Joining us from somewhere in Paris by the link up we have is Lynn Tahini, French-Lebanese journalist at EC Beirut. And I point out that Lynn, I remember, is a former colleague of ours here at France 24 on our Arabic channel. Great to see you, Lynn. Looking fantastic as always.
Great to see you.
Back in the studio, we have with us Rina Basij, who's correspondent for Al Monitor. Thank you, Rina, for coming in to be with us here.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us from Stockholm, Rusbeh Parsi, regular visitor to our studios. Great to see you, sir. Looking well as well. Rusbeh Parsi is adjunct senior lecturer at Lund University. We'll let the panel loose after this report from Delano de Souza looking at who was Ali Larijani.
He's seen as one of the pillars of the Islamic Republic, and yet he works mainly from the shadows. Ali Larijani is Iran's top national security official and quickly became the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's right-hand man. According to the New York Times, the country's former supreme leader tasked him with running the country in the event of war. The move effectively sidelines the sitting president as Larijani exerts control over Iran's nuclear and diplomatic affairs.
Since the start, we've been convinced that war will not resolve the disagreements between our two countries. Regional conflicts between Iran and the West must be resolved by dialogue. Others have been mistaken in thinking that these problems can be solved by force. This attitude has been detrimental to progress.
A few weeks after the 12-day war with Israel last June, Larijani was named head of the National Security Council, returning to a position he held 20 years prior. Son of a dignitary close to Ayatollah Khamenei, Larijani started his career within the Revolutionary Guard before becoming the director of Iran's national broadcaster in 1994. Between 2005 and 2007, he was the lead nuclear negotiator and was a key figure between the 2015 JCPOA agreement. He ran for president several times but was rejected by the Guardian Council.
Resolving the issue of U.S. sanctions in order to open up the economic space will be one of my diplomatic priorities.
Ali Larijani is one of the officials sanctioned by Washington for the bloody crackdown against protesters in January, a crisis he blames on American and Israeli interference.
Delano de Souza with that report. I'll give proximity the priority and start in the studio with Rina Basij, correspondent for Al Monitor. In terms of what we're seeing here, in terms of what has happened, what is your take on this situation? What does this mean going forward?
I think after the killing of Ali Khamenei, everybody said, oh, it will be extremely difficult to touch any of the other leaders. There will be no more element of surprise because Ali Khamenei, we know now that some of the precautions he adopted were not really perfected, and Israel hit him when he was on the ground floor of a building. He was not underneath ground. So the assumption was that it would be extremely difficult for Israel and for the Americans to hit any other senior Iranian leaders. And he received, this is confirmed, Ali Larijani, who is the strongman in Iran since the death of Ali Khamenei. It is not Mujtaba Khamenei, the successor of the supreme leader, who is the man taking this who was taking the decisions until a few hours ago in Iran. So this, first of all, it's a big win for Israeli and American intelligence. That's obvious. Hopefully also a boost of hope for the Iranian people who see that neither the Israelis nor the Americans are done in this fight of trying to facilitate the toppling of the regime. And of course, you can imagine the paranoia that must have that the rest of these leaders must feel right now. If Israel and the Americans got to Ali Larijani, they could get to anybody.
It really creates, I imagine, among those who are in charge in Iran right now, or feel that they think they are in charge, it must create a real sense, as you say, of paranoia about what happens next. Rita, thank you very much indeed. Let's cross over to Peyman Azmoude. Go ahead.
One point I want to make here is that, and I think it's important to remember, less than a week ago, I think it was last Thursday, Ali Larijani, Mohsen Ejei, a lot of the other basically remaining regime leaders and stalwarts, they were all out in the street in Tehran for Jerusalem Day, for Quds Day, basically to project this image of confidence, of security, but on a certain level also using the people around them in the march as human shields. And a point that a few people made when they were watching, for example, someone like Ali Larijani kind of come out of the shadows and take part in that demonstration was, well, has he just made it easier for Israeli intelligence to track him? And we have the answer today that very clearly he did. So in terms of the element of surprise, I think that's definitely true. But I think this also goes to show just how deeply the Iranian state, the regime, has been infiltrated, especially by Israeli intelligence. I don't think any of the, whether it's Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf or Ahmad Vahidi or Mohsen Rezai, kind of these IRGC stalwarts who are currently effectively running the country now around Mujtaba, like these are the heavyweights that are left. I don't think any of them can particularly say that they're in a position of security.
Thank you, sir, for now. Lynn Taney, can I bring you in, Lebanese journalist with ICI Beirut. Lynn, your thoughts? I'm seeing Bruce Bay. This is Lynn. Your thoughts, Lynn? We have clearly an issue with Lynn freezing there. We'll get back to Lynn Tahini when we possibly can. But let's go straight to Stockholm, where Rusbeh Parsi is ready to go. I know, adjunct senior lecturer at Lund University. Rusbeh, over to you, sir.
I would differ somewhat when it comes to the assessment of what's going on. I think it's clear that Ali Khamenei got the death he wanted, the death of a martyr, supposedly. I don't think it was that much of an intelligence operation required to find him. I think obviously the other ones who are now being killed are supposed to survive longer. So in that sense, it is a challenge for the Islamic Republic. But I think at the same time, it's important to remember that the operational phase of this war is not decided by Ali Larijani. It's a very decentralized chain of command, exactly because they are well aware of the fact that the Israelis and the Americans are very much superior when it comes to these kind of operations. So it's not that they can hide and forever manage a war from a centralized node. So I think they are taking this in their stride. Whether it will have long-term effects is a different issue, because then we're talking about what will happen politically. And I think for the Israelis, it was important to kill Larijani because Larijani would be one of the interlocutors when the day comes that the Americans and the Iranians do sit down to kind of get themselves both out of the hole that they've managed to get themselves into. And I think that is something that the Israelis want to stop as far as possible in order to prolong this war.
So is it true to say, Rusbeh, that Larijani was someone that perhaps Washington thought they could have, somewhere down the line, have done business with?
Well, Larijani has a reputation of being a pragmatist. Now, that pragmatism might not always, chime with what we would want them to do or see them do. But he would definitely be one of the people who would be worth talking to and who would be flexible in trying to find a solution that works for both sides. Now, that might not happen next week in any case, because I think there are also those within the Iranian leadership who want this war to go on as long as it takes to get Donald Trump to understand that attacking Iran comes at a cost. So that when they finally then eventually sit down to talk, he is not tempted to kind of take a break in the negotiations by attacking Iran, which is what he did in 2025 and which is what he did now.
Rusbeh, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at how these two men who have been killed, that is Ali Larijani and Gholamreza Soleimani, fitted into the whole structure of security in Iran. They were key figures. Emerald Maxwell with this.
It's a security apparatus built on several pillars. Iran has more than a dozen intelligence agencies which compete for influence, the two most powerful of which are the Ministry of Intelligence and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intelligence organization. Above them sits the Supreme National Security Council, which develops national security policy and is headed by Ali Larijani. As well as intelligence, the powerful Revolutionary Guards also have 5 service branches which were created after the 1979 revolution as a counterweight to the traditional army. As well as its own ground forces and navy, it also has an aerospace force, which runs Iran's ballistic missile program. Meanwhile, its Quds force is responsible for foreign operations, and its Basij paramilitary force is tasked with enforcing internal security. The Basij is headed by General Gholamreza Soleimani. It claims it can mobilize 600,000 volunteers and is known for its role in violently suppressing anti-regime protests. Both the Basij and Iran's other security forces have been frequent targets of attack in the war so far.
Let's bring it back to our guests here in the studio. We've got Peyman Azmoudeh, Rina Bassis here in the studio, Lynn Tahini joining us from Paris, and Rouzbeh Parsi from Stockholm. Lynn, can I try and bring you in now? Lynn Tahini, French-Libyan journalist with Ici Beirut, former colleague here at France 24. It's great to see you, Lynn. Great to see you getting on, doing things and forging your way across the media. In terms of what this means for the other groups across the region, and I'm thinking about what happens in your home, what you consider to be your home country, Lebanon. What will be the sort of the echoes that will be heard there about what has happened in Tehran?
It depends. Where do you position yourself? Because if it's for the Hezbollah or a large majority of the Shia community, it's a major blow, a major setback. Because Larijani, I would like to remind everyone, came to Lebanon last summer, and he was seen by the Shia community, by the Hezbollah militants, as a hero. So this is a major shock, and it could have some impact on Hezbollah militants on the ground. But knowing that the regime is, it's very complicated to that 47 years of entrenchment get destroyed. It won't be destroyed this way. So I think that the regime it's a setback, but it's not at all the end. There won't be a political vacuum, if you know what I mean.
Will it affect Hezbollah? What effect will it have on Hezbollah? Surely there must be some kind of echo going around there.
After the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, that was seen as, a hero for Hezbollah and for a lot of people across Iran. Larijani was seen as the number 2 after Ali Khamenei, the number 2 of the regime, and basically number 1, because we still haven't seen any sign of Mujtaba Khamenei. So Larijani was seen as the person that was handling almost everything, and we could see he could see him in interviews, meeting people on the streets. So the militants of Hezbollah and the military part of Hezbollah, which is today managed by the IRGC, it's a major setback for them, because it has a symbol. Ali Larijani has a symbolic image, if you want.
Lynn, thank you for now very much indeed. Lynn Tahini there from Ici Beirut. The title of this debate is about who next in Tehran, who next could be, who next in charge. It goes to be who next in the crosshairs of Israel and the United States. That's the reality of what happens to whoever is the leadership in Iran today. Rina, I know you have something to say. Go ahead.
Yes, just to continue a little bit what was said before me about this relationship between Hezbollah and the leadership in Iran, because the moment when Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, was killed, that was a watershed moment also in the level of these relations. Why am I saying that? Because Hassan Nasrallah had a very strong status also vis-a-vis the leadership in Iran. They treated him as equal to them, not as a proxy, not as somebody who is receiving instructions, but really somebody who had a say that could tell Ali Khamenei, this is what I want to do, support me. The moment he was killed, of course, Iran understood that Hezbollah's leadership became more weak. And we've seen it over the last year with Naim Qassem, who is not a charismatic person, who is not a decision maker. And the Iranians thus decided that they have to step in. They can no longer trust the leadership of Hezbollah take by themselves decisions. Decisions have to come directly from Tehran. Now that, first of all, Ali Khamenei is killed, and now that Ali Larijani is killed, this should also weaken Hezbollah because they find themselves without the instructions of Tehran, without anybody deciding. And more importantly, there is the question of the financing. Will this very weakened leadership in Tehran be able to continue financing Hezbollah in Lebanon? If they don't transfer the money, then Hezbollah is left with nothing. So this and the question, who will succeed Ali Larijani as the strongman, not so much in his position, but in his decision-making capacity, that's also a very crucial question for Hezbollah.
Is there a possibility that this could be someone who takes over who is more extreme, more hardline? When you see what's going on around you, surely that changes a mindset?
I mean, that's always a possibility, and that was the possibility that was on the table since the beginning of the military operation. But on the other side, Ali Larijani is one of the major people, maybe the person most responsible for the killing of more than 30,000 people. So not so easy to become more extreme to that, at least in the eyes of the Iranian people. The fact that maybe Washington considered him as somebody you can do business with, I'm sure that in Israel nobody have thought of him that way, neither concerning the nuclear program nor on the ballistic missile program. He was an advocate of both of them. Very extreme, yes. Getting more extreme to that, I'm not sure.
Rita, thank you. Before I let you loose, Payman, let's hear the words of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacting to the reaction to the killings.
This morning, we eliminated Ali Larijani. Ali Larijani is the boss of the Revolutionary Guards, which is the gang of gangsters that actually runs Iran. We also eliminated the commander of the Basij alongside him. These are the gangsters' assistants who spread terror on the streets of Tehran and other cities of Iran against the population. We are undermining this regime in the hope of giving the Iranian people a chance to remove it. It will not happen all at once. It will not happen easily. But if we persist in this, we will give them a chance to take their fate into their own hands.
Benjamin Netanyahu being very clear and being very Benjamin Netanyahu about it. I think it's worth reminding people we've got to keep our humanity here because we're talking about people being killed, but nonetheless people being killed who perhaps were behind the killing of others. So we mustn't let ourselves get too corrupted in how we think about human life. Payman, I know you've got something to say.
So we've been talking about Ali Larijani as supposedly this more pragmatic, pragmatic conservatives, what we always used to call him and his brothers.
Could the US do business with him, do you think?
I think last year the Trump administration thought that they could.
Okay.
And when we were talking about kind of this idea of Trump always looking for his Delcy Rodriguez, looking for his Iranian Delcy, Larijani's name was naturally one of the names that continually came up. And I think you made a very important point. I think January changed the calculus on a lot of levels because Ali Larijani went from being this pragmatic conservative who was known for being a close advisor of Ali Khamenei, who was known for being a pillar of the system, but fundamentally more reasonable than the really, really radical types. At some point, when you're the one commanding the massacre of tens of thousands of protesters, I don't know what is more radical or more extreme than that, really. It's at some point, we're playing semantics here. What I will say is, and I think this is maybe in the long term for the political evolution of Iran, maybe even a salutary moment. Ali Larijani was one of the few civilians kind of existing in parallel with this security state, with this junta basically that's taking shape with the IRGC. And I think maybe the knock-on effect of what is happening with these assassinations is you're stripping bare. So Israel and the U.S. are effectively, and maybe not entirely with the best of intentions, I think we can all be clear on that, but they're stripping away this kind of facade that there are, the pragmatists in the system, in the regime that we can work with, which was the narrative, 10 years ago when they signed the JCPOA. And it was really kind of U.S. policy for decades to, find the moderates and we'll make a deal with the moderates. Now there aren't going to be really there isn't going to be anyone left within the system. And I think when you ask a lot of people in Iran, their response will be, what we told you so. We've been living with these. We've been living under the system for decades. These people have been torturing us. They've been arresting us. They've been harassing us. They've been stealing the national wealth. So I think a lot of Iranians look at this and they don't say, oh, but we're losing the people that could potentially reconstruct the country. They're saying these people are our killers. And so when I look at, for example, the news that we got today, when I look at, for example, that message that Benjamin Netanyahu is putting out, I don't know if people are going to take to the streets tonight. I doubt that while they're being bombed, you're going to see a massive crowd. What I do know is that there are tens of thousands of families in Iran right now who see this news today, and they may never see, for example, their child or their spouse's killer in a court of law, but at least this person is no longer among us. And I think that might be a little bit, for them at least, it might assuage the grief a little bit.
In some way, bringing some kind of closure to a situation of
we're
great tragedy.
We're in a wartime setting, and a lot of the other people who are involved in the massacre are obviously still around and still running the show. But I think we're seeing, and this is a point that I want to make, I think the Islamic Republic right now is going through maybe a decade's worth of political history in the span of a month. Ali Khamenei dying, Ali Larijani dying, Gholamreza Soleimani died. These are very senior commanders and senior officials who have basically overseen the repression of successive waves of protest. And you're seeing this transition to a military junta that people thought was coming. For the last 20 years, you've had analysts saying Ali Khamenei will probably be replaced by some kind of IRGC-run regime. Now we're seeing it. We're kind of seeing it kind of up close and personal. And juntas tend to be brittle. Of purely military-run regimes don't last very long. There's a reason why they always have, after 2 or 3 years, they always try to bring back a civilian government because they can't directly administer a country for very long. So at some point, I think the Islamic Republic is being forced via this war to confront an eventuality that was always going to be happening anyway. I don't think we should go down this narrative saying this war somehow made the regime more extreme. And I think that will maybe hasten the next stage of Iran's political history. In a way that maybe in a few years' time we'll look back on and actually realize that this sped things up.
As you pointed out, there has already been an element of brutality, which some people find hard to believe, enacted by the current regime. It could get worse. Well, I should say it's a leap to say that would happen because of the war.
January was already an Assadist level of violence. We're looking at kind of like a year's worth of violence during the Syrian civil war in the span of a weekend. So I think it's hard to see how it could get worse.
Payman, thank you. Payman was talking about Delcy Rodriguez, who has taken over as head of president of Venezuela in the wake of the abduction of Nicolas Maduro by U.S. Special Forces. Perhaps Donald Trump had some kind of a move like that in mind. Rusbeh, can I bring you in to talk about, do you see somewhere inside Iran any kind of Delcy Rodriguez figure? Is there anybody at all that the U.S. could possibly put up as a leader? One could talk about the former Shah, maybe, if we talked about someone from the outside. Sorry, the Shah's former son. The son of the former Shah.
Delcy was someone from inside the system. It was from inside the system that decided that they needed to make a deal with Donald Trump. I think the Islamic Republic, using its concentric circles of an oligarchy, is much less vulnerable to that kind of deal making. So I don't think that's going to happen. But I want to address some of the things that was said by your other guests.
Rusbeh, I need to stop you. Sir. I'm sorry. The sound we're getting from you isn't very good. We will come back to you as soon as our sound people have double-checked what is wrong, because I'm very keen to hear what you have to say, Rusbeh. So we'll check your sound and we'll get back to you, sir. I promise. Thank you. Rina, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
No, I think I agree totally with what has been said before. We've seen a level of brutality that is absolutely unimaginable in a very short period of just a few days. So one would imagine, yes, that maybe some sort of closure or at least some sort of sense of justice for the relatives of all these families. And then also, as we said before, to instill the feeling within the Iranian leadership that they have nowhere to escape to. That's very important because Ali Larijani, we start having some of the details coming out of how he was killed, and it seems that together with a group of other senior officials, they were escaping from one secret apartment to another until they arrived to Shiraz, to some sort of a tent compound or some other compound where they were tracked down and killed. So this means that the Israelis and the Americans, they can hit anywhere. It's not just in Tehran, because Israel was focusing much of the strikes against the so-called regime symbols in Tehran. They cannot escape to other places. They will be found. And also, I mean, there was the question of how efficient all these strikes were. Israel and the United States divided the strikes geographically, but also according to the targets, because we have targets of regime symbols, we have the ballistic missiles, we have the nuclear plants, and let's say on the nuclear plants, we're not quite sure how efficient it was. On the missiles, we know that it's very efficient because we see in Israel that the number of missiles that are being fired is going down, even though, I mean, they're still falling on the heads of Israelis, but less in quantity than before. And then the rest of this question of the symbols of the regime. So now this evening we had the answer, yes, it's efficient. And this is a very concrete example of that.
Rina, thank you. Let's quickly hear from Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz.
I have just been told we have attacked the Chief of Staff, who is also the Secretary of the National Security Council, Ali Larijani, and the head of the Basij, Iran's main repressive apparatus responsible for the massacre of demonstrators. They were eliminated last night and have joined the head of the extermination program, Khamenei, and all the agents of the axis of evil in the depths of hell.
Rusbeh Parsi is now back with us, adjunct senior lecturer at Lund University. Rusbeh, you were about to address a number of issues that the guests have raised. Back to you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to be careful with the numbers used. The HRRANA, which is the human rights organization in New York, counts 7,000 confirmed dead in the January protests and another 11,000 being investigated, which is more than anyone could imagine, yes. But I think it's also a bit easy and simple to say that the Iranian state was always going to be an IRGC fascist dictatorship, and this is only showing us that that was the case all along. I think that's making it very simple, and more importantly, the Israeli experience of killing the leadership of its enemies and to go in the direction of that whoever replaces them are worse. They're more radical. Nasrallah was the result of previous assassinations. I think if you're looking at the Iranian leadership, because it is much bigger than just these figureheads that we know and are famous, I think what you're going to see is a younger generation of IRGC leaders who cut their teeth in the civil war of Syria. And they are no less prone to fight back. So I think one should be a bit careful about what the success, the tactical success now that Israel and America has on a more long-term strategic timeline. And as far as Delsi scenario is concerned, that assumes that this leadership in Iran is not the oligarchy that it is, and that it is not that sufficiently coherent to be able to withstand that kind of temptation, as it were. And I think if you look at the decentralized way in which they are waging their war, it's very difficult to find a single person who you can pick up and say, this is the anointed one, and then everyone else is going to fall into line. More importantly, because I think the Israeli goals with this war and the American goals don't fully synchronize. What the Israelis are looking for an implosion of the state, while the Americans still harbor some ambition and dream of being able to find a new leadership that can run Iran, if nothing else because their Gulf allies don't want total chaos in a country of 92 million people.
Surely Donald Trump sees some kind of transactional future, some kind of money deal that he can get out of this somewhere along the line.
Yes, but the question then is, what does he offer? And I think his calculation was that by killing Khamenei and killing a couple of other people, he will basically make the rest of the leadership of Iran submit and just be grateful and thankful that they are also not killed. And then they will give him whatever he wants, and that will be that. Now, they instead learned from the June war that if you do not fight back hard enough to make the Americans pay a price, America and Trump will not respect you. And then if you negotiate with them, you will never get anything in return. Now, of course, all of this hinges on that there will be a negotiation. And that assumes that the Islamic Republic survives and that Donald Trump, in the end, gets tired of waging this war and prefers to talk to them rather than try to kill them off.
Rouzbeh, thank you. As you're talking, we've just had word coming into us here at France 24 that the Iran Revolutionary Guards have confirmed the death of the Basij paramilitary chief in that US-Israeli strike. Rina, I know that you knew this already from your sources, but we're getting it's coming through from this, so this is why I'm putting it out as we get it. In terms of the reaction to the war across the United States, there's been a significant development today with a man called Joe Kent, who was the head of counterterrorism in the Trump administration, resigning. This is his face. Veteran soldier, he says that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. He's talked about the United States, of course, and it's clear that we, the Americans, started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He said that he cannot, in good conscience, his words again, back the Trump administration's war in Iran. Donald Trump's reaction was to say, good, he should go, because that's the way Donald Trump reacts to things that don't go his way. But certainly he has not shed any tears about Joe Kent saying that he doesn't back his war. There are signs, of course, that many people in the United States share that point of view, that the US should not be involved in what is going on. And I'm wondering what the people here around this table think about that situation. Do you think, and I'll start with you, Paimon, do you think that that kind of change of opinion in America is going to have some kind of an impact on what happens next? Or are the US too far involved in this to come out?
So we talked a lot about Iran and the situation inside Iran and the impact on the regime. We did not talk about the impact on the regime in the United States. So I will say, I think from the American perspective, this clearly has not gone whatever way Donald Trump planned for it to go. You can see that in his reactions. You can see that in his statements. You can see that it's not a popular war. So at least if you go back and you look at the examples of the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, when the Bush administration launched those offensives, when they invaded those countries, it had very strong public backing. It was a completely different context. We were right after 9/11. Donald Trump went into this war with a 40% approval rating for himself and for the military operation that he had just launched. So you already have basically 60% of the American public that does not support this operation or doesn't feel any particular way about it. What the Iranians are banking on, and the other guests made the point of the costs that this will have, or that the Iranian government is trying to inflict basically on the U.S. First and foremost, it's gas prices. So we're going to be looking at gas prices in the U.S. in an election season. So we are 7 months out from the midterms. And Donald Trump is very much cognizant of that, I think. The Republican Party is very much cognizant of that. And I think that does put a shelf life on a very kind of extended campaign. I think the global energy markets, the global fertilizer market, global commodities markets, they really haven't yet priced in the impact that this is going to have. But a lot of people have made this point, and it's a very good one. Even if you were to stop the war today, even if the Strait of Hormuz was going to be completely reopened today, you've already had a big impact on oil production all across the Persian Gulf, on fertilizer exports. Basically, all this is going to be felt downstream in the months to come. So on some level, there is quite a bit of a baked-in cost for Donald Trump. I think politically, this war will end up costing him quite severely in November. But in the short term, I think looking at his kind of ego and his personality, I think he would have a very hard time walking away from this war today. I think in a couple weeks' time, we might start seeing moves towards maybe him wanting to extract himself. But I think for the moment, he's a bit too far in.
There is, of course, a ground invasion going on in Lebanon right now. Let's bring in Lynn Tahini to talk a bit about that and the impact that is having. Lynn Tahini, of course, from Ici Beirut. Lynn, Benjamin Netanyahu never seems to be affected by any bad publicity or bad polling in Israel which say that people are against war or against violence. He seems to sort of still thrive, still be there, still be in charge. And right now in Lebanon, more families being forced from their homes because of this ground invasion and, of course, the continuing airstrikes. The situation in Lebanon right now getting towards a humanitarian catastrophe.
Totally. The situation is alarming because we have more than 1 million displaced people in just 2 weeks. So by comparison, in 2024, which was a 2-month war, we had the same number of displaced people. So you see the amount of the displaced people is huge. It's like more than 14% of the total population. So I think we're at the edge of a huge catastrophe, humanitarian, security and a sanitary catastrophe in Lebanon. And Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to stop. So I guess this is, we're going to say this is the war. Like last year, when Israel reacted to the war, they only wanted to contain Hezbollah. It was not, they didn't want to like cut the head of the snake. So we are seeing now with the war in Iran and with what is happening in Lebanon that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to go to the end of the mission that he decided he wants to finish with Hezbollah.
Lynn, thank you very much indeed. Rina.
Yeah, just a short reminder that the military operation of the US and of Israel started on the 28th of February, one day after Hezbollah attacked Israel. So what we are seeing now, first of all, it's very important to remember, this is the result of a decision by Hezbollah to attack Israel. A few days ago, we saw in one night 200 rockets and missiles that were fired against Israel. And it seems that Hezbollah, despite everything, despite the suffering that this terror organization is causing the Lebanese people, they are not at all ready to stop. Even this evening, Israel is preparing for another very massive rocket and missile fire that should accompany, we heard earlier this evening, the speech of Naim Qassem, the head of Hezbollah. He has absolutely no intention of stopping. So first of all, when you say, and I'm by no means a defender of the Netanyahu government, but by saying that it's Netanyahu who started, that's, first of all, factually, it's not correct here.
So this is one of the strange things that people, and myself included, struggle to understand sometimes about what happens in Lebanon. We have the Lebanese government, which has in effect banned the Hezbollah militia section. There's a political section which is involved in providing many jobs and services for Shia communities within Lebanon. That perhaps will be tolerated going forward. It's how you get rid of the militia that's a difficult thing. It's people talk about a state within a state. How do you break that down? Can it be broken down without Israel invading? I mean, this is where we're at now, isn't it? As you said, Hezbollah attacked Israel. That's why we are where we are. But was it possible that the Lebanese government could have suppressed Hezbollah without any help? Is it something that was an inevitable result?
That's the issue of the problem here, because the Lebanese government a few months ago announced that it completed the first phase of this ceasefire agreement, namely it disarmed Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. We see now, these past 16 days or 17 days, this is not true. Not only Hezbollah was not disarmed, Hezbollah reconstructed the military capability it lost. And we've seen many people, many militants of Hezbollah that belong to the Radwan commander units of this organization coming back to these areas in southern Lebanon that was supposed to be I don't like very much this word, but cleaned of their presence. So the Lebanese government has a big problem. Its army, true, is rather weak. It's not well financed. It needs training. It needs budgets. We can't say it's their fault, if you want, that they are not managing to face Hezbollah militarily, but the fact is there. I mean, Hezbollah is getting stronger. The Lebanese army, for whatever reason, they don't manage to deal with the problem. And Israel, since October 7, has adopted a policy of zero tolerance. no attacks by Hezbollah will be tolerated, and we see now the result.
Rina, thank you. Rouzbeh, over to you, sir.
No, I just want to note that during the so-called ceasefires that Israel has, both in Gaza and more importantly in Lebanon, in Lebanon, Israel has killed more than 300 people since that ceasefire took place. So the idea that somehow everything was fine until Hezbollah shot off a couple of rockets doesn't really chime with reality. Now, that doesn't exonerate Hezbollah from any kind of responsibility. But the fact remains that over the years, Israel has used Lebanon as its own little sandbox with thousands of airspace and ground violations of Lebanese sovereignty. And in that sense, this is just true to form. There's nothing new in this.
Rouzbeh, thank you very much indeed. We're more or less out of time, but I need a final comment from Peyman Azmoudeh in terms of where we are now, in terms of what happens next. What do you think? What is your feeling about what the next days, weeks, months might bring us?
So I think Iran is in for some dark days. I think it's important not to sugarcoat it. I think there was a lot of optimism at the start of this war, both within the Iranian public and in the U.S. and in Israel, that they would take out, Ali Khamenei. They would take out a couple people. Everything would crumble. I think what's going to happen now is that Iran is kind of on the road to its next system, is on the road to a new political evolution. But for example, as we saw in '79, it's a process that can take years. It can be riven with internal conflict. I think the concern here is you have a country that basically starts to lose a certain amount of internal cohesion, not over the long term. I think it's important not to overblow kind of these fears that Iran is going to fall apart. But what we saw in Syria, for example, during the last years of the Assad regime, is that you basically had just years of, for example, Israeli airstrikes, because Syria didn't control its own airspace. Iran today does not control its own airspace. So even if, this war was to end in a ceasefire, I think you would continue to see, for example, Israeli strikes on different targets, what they call mowing the lawn. And I think if that drags out for a long time, that's going to be more and more time lost for kind of Iranians who need to think about rebuilding the country after all this. And I think a lot of them are hoping that, better days come sooner rather than later.
Peyman Azmoudeh, thank you very much indeed. Senior Consultant with the Risk and Compliance Practice at Forward Global. Thank you for your contributions. Much appreciated. Thanks also to Rina Basij, Correspondent at Al Monitor. Great to have you in the studio with us again. And thanks to our guests joining us from afar. That's Lynn Tahini, French-Lebanese journalist at ICI Beirut, and of course, former colleague at France 24. Great to see you, Lynn. And also great to see you too, Rouzbeh Parsi, Adjunct Lecturer at Senior Lecturer at Lund University. Thanks to you for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.